To 19th century Europeans, the Ottoman Empire was the sick man of Europe. However, the diseases that had sickened it were contagions spread from Europe. These diseases were nationalism and the resulting competition among Europe's great powers. A uniquely powerful form of identity politics, nationalism has outlasted imperialism. As a positive force, nationalism was the exhilarating elixir that united and liberated nations. As a negative force, it suppressed internal difference and turned others into rivals and enemies. Competition among the great powers propelled European imperialism, which the Ottomans resisted, but not without the semi-dependency of lost provinces, unequal treaties, and a weakened economy. Europe's sickness led to its suicide in World War I and its sequels, with the Ottoman collapse as collateral damage. Dynamism amid destruction was, however, the great paradox of late Ottoman history. For generations, sultans, statesmen, and others had striven to save the empire on which their identity depended. In World War I, they endured defeat, but they inflicted on the Entente forces the colossal Dardanelles defeat in 1915, as well as the worst defeat in the British Army's history at the siege of Kut al-Amara soon after. Facts like these call attention to the reformist dynamism generated within the superstructure of the cosmopolitan empire. For over a century, the driving force in the empire's history had been the Ottoman engagement with global modernity. Modernity means the acceleration of change and space-time compression. It is as if distance has been rolled up and time collapsed, as Fatma Aliyeh, the first Ottoman female novelist, wrote in 1890. Many Ottomans and Turks believed that their problem was backwardness. The factual record of late Ottoman modernity mostly contradicts that. It depends where you look. Railroad building was the worst case because of the financial and technological challenges. Yet even the Hejaz Railway opened in 1908. In other respects, modern innovations occurred in near simultaneity with those in Europe. The advent of mass circulation print media around 1860, modern civil service legislation 1870s, modern public schools 1880s, the advent of sound recording by 1900. By the reign of Abdul Hamid, it is possible to talk about his technopolitics of modernity. In culture, the time lag vanishes totally. Namik Kemal, Ahmed Midhat, and Fatma Aliyeh experimented with modern techniques from naturalism through the psychological novel, simultaneously with Balzac and Zola in France. Dynamism amid destruction. Ever since the late 1700s, the Ottomans had done everything they could to strengthen the empire through reform and elite formation. The empire could no longer defend itself by military means alone. Consequently, civil officials gained enormously in influence, expanding from perhaps 2,000 scribes in the late 1700s to 35,000 or so civil officials in service at the same time in the 1880s. If politics today is less militarized in Turkey than in some other countries, that owes much to the creation of the system of provincial administration staffed by civilians. Prove me wrong if you can, but I think the Ottoman Empire after 1839 was the first time and place in all of Islamic history when civilians had primary charge of local administration. The new civil and military elite had the lead role in generating the reformist dynamism of the period. If the empire fell, they would lose their identity. If the dynamism had not been overwhelmed by destructive forces, what might have happened? The future would have required some form of federalism. Increasing literacy in different languages and the advent of multiple print capitalisms would have required shock absorbers to accommodate new differences. Civil and military officials were already being trained in multiple languages under Abdul Hamid. Members of the religious and ethnic minorities, Jews, Orthodox Christians, Armenians, and Christian Arabs, Both joined the administration and sought new ways to engage in civic participation. If left in peace, these trends could have blossomed into cosmopolitan Ottoman citizenship. The growing professionalization of Ottoman administration would have meant civilians administering Iraq, Syria, and Palestine rather than foreigners. The Sultanate would have carried on as a constitutional monarchy with an active parliament and contested elections. Sultans Abdulhamid I and II had already modeled the role of the Sultan as a kind of chief executive. A key factor in the dynasty's success had been in reproductive politics. Relying on slave concubinage had enabled a single dynasty to survive for 600 years without genetic impairment. This might have been one of the matters most in need of change in a world that no longer tolerated slavery. But members of the dynasty had started to want change here already. The continuity of the Ismaili imamate into the 21st century, incidentally, provides an example of how benign a survival of an Ottoman constitutional monarchy might have been. The Ottoman sultans had succeeded historically by patronizing the widest possible variety of Sunni religious movements, while at the same time accommodating all kinds of Christians and Jews. Civic equality across religious lines was established from 1856 on. The Ottoman Empire would have continued, as it had been for centuries, to have the holy places of all three monotheisms within its frontiers. In the age of air travel, as in the age of rail and steam, pilgrims of all three faiths would have depended on the Sultan Caliph to complete their pilgrimages. Without Europe's catastrophic trajectory from anti-Semitism to the Holocaust, just try to imagine how different the history of Gaza and Palestine might have been. From its beginnings onward, Ottoman history was a story of both Ghazis defending frontiers and mystics ignoring them. Mystique sans frontières, in Michel Balivet's wonderful phrase. The religious common market flourished right up to the moment of its destruction. The religiosity of ordinary Muslims, Christians, and Jews was more alike than any of the three is compared to present-day scripturalist versions. Without World War I, the Armenian genocide, and toxic nationalism, the religious common market discovered by Oxford's own J.W. Hasluck in 1913, 14, and 15 could have continued to flourish. One of the historical strengths of the Ottoman Empire lay in being what Ignazek called a peasant empire, perpetuating the preference for small family farms inherited from the Byzantine and Roman empires. That prevented the political pathologies and revolutionary upheavals seen in Russia. The concept was Roman, but the administrative techniques used to govern it came out of the Turco-Mongol tradition. The last land survey, carried out in the 1840s, again demonstrated the high-level administrative capacity of early centuries. That was probably a major reason why the transition from empire to republic in Turkey could be described as more evolutionary than revolutionary. In terms used at the time, more a matter of inqilab, gradual transformation, than of ihtilal, violent upheaval or revolution. Modernity is identified in social history with the rise of the bourgeoisie. Sociologically, the trend that truly could have propelled ongoing Ottoman history was the formation of middle-class elements among both Muslims and non-Muslims. Between 1860 and 1960, the tectonic event in social history was the rise of middle-class elements. Epochal changes in gender roles and family relations accompanied the trend. The Muslim middle class included the bureaucratic intelligentsia as well as merchants and landowners. The brains and the money bags did not always realize that they sank or swam together, but crises and wars forced this realization on them. The same people ruled the empire and republic from 1908 until 1950. Turkish politics did not fully escape bourgeois control until the advent of mass politics, symbolized by 1968. If the Arab provinces after 1918 had not endured foreign domination, might their history have also followed the same trajectory. Language and literary culture. Most imponderable of all is how their history might have differed, particularly for Turkish itself. On the one hand, the poor fit between the Arabic alphabet and the Turkish language would have generated ongoing demands for script reform. On the other hand, the self-inflicted damage of the post-1928 language revolution could have spared generations of Turks from believing that their modern literature only began in 1928. In that case, it was violent revolution, dil devrimi, to some a permanent revolution. The vistas opened by speculation about what might have happened if the Ottoman Empire had continued are not only chronological but also spatial. If demands for mono-ethnic nationalism and great power rivalries had not dominated European history, the history of both Southeastern Europe and the Arab lands could certainly have been less violent than it actually has been. The economic benefits of the empire-wide market and the cultural benefits of having the holy places of all three monotheisms in a single state could have continued. The fact that Ottoman survival might have produced such a benign outcome does not mean that it necessarily would have. On the other hand, if the empire had survived, the much wider regions might have enjoyed the benefits that the Turkish Republic had of being the most successful independent developing country in all of Afro-Eurasia other than Japan during the interwar period. Thank you.